So we know out of the whole crack epidemic came hip hop. Now we all know about Eric B and Rakim. We know about, what does it mean? Everybody remember that song? Remember Schoolie D and PSK, and, KRS-One and BDP, Cypress Hill, Ice-T, 6 in the morning, all them songs came up out of the whole crack thing. They was rapping about what they was doing in the hood, selling drugs and this and that. It was to some point glamorized. It was glamorized, but they was spitting real stuff. Now that's in the beginning. That's when hip hop was ours. Hip hop was ours at that time. White America wasn't paying attention to it. Mainstream media wasn't paying attention to it. None of the major corporations was paying attention to it until NWA sold 1 million copies. And then, it blew up. So now, before we get into all that, you got to remember, before, gangster rap, and before everything took off, we got to remember that Public Enemy, Chuck D and a lot of other celebrities came out, and there was so many commercials and, so much celebrities speaking against crack. Hip hop basically, well, it kind of destroyed crack during that time. It was responsible for, lowering the whole thing with crack. That and the fact that people was going to jail for life and got so many years. Hip hop really came together and was like, this is wrong. We need to stop talking about this. We need to stop promoting it. And, so many rappers was coming against crack, and it slowly started to die. So now crack is starting to run its course. You got little pockets of crack dealers here and there. Of course, it still existed in the black community, of course, because I grew up with the whole crack thing. I remember in the 90s, crack was still popping, especially in my neighborhood. So, but it wasn't as widespread, or even it wasn't at least promoted in the media as it being as big as it was, during the mid 80s, late 80s. But crack was still around, of course. But it started to really die down, and people started to really try to do something with themselves, and that wasn't good for these people, obviously. So they needed a new crack. They needed something else to keep these prisons filled, of course, and to keep the black community down and to keep us destroying each other. So of course, gangster rap was promoted. Gangster rap was allowed to be put out. And you got to understand something. And this is what people are not getting. People don't understand the power of music. Music on its own is deadly. Music combined with visualization is even deadlier. So you got to understand how music affects the brain and the body on a scientific level. So, for instance, you got these rappers rapping about the crack game. Basically, their life, what they were seeing in the streets. They were seeing drug dealing, crack whores, so they was rapping about it. And from that, they was getting gold chains. They was getting nice cars. They was getting girls. So when you put all this together, the visualization of your reality combined with the music, and you put that out there to the public, of course it's going to be imitated. So kids are going to see this, and they're going to say to themselves, this is how I get money. This is what I need to do. I got to sell drugs. I got to sell crack. Then I can be like these guys. I can have the chains, and I can have the cars, and I can have everything I'm seeing in these music videos. Everything I'm hearing about in these lyrics, this is what I can have, so this is what I need to do. So music is very powerful, but it can also have the reverse effect, because we saw with Public Enemy, with Chuck D and them rapping against crack, that it died down, because people was hearing a positive message through music. Now, I want you to, take a listen to how powerful music is, because if I tell you, I don't think you're going to believe me. So I want you, some qualified people more than me to tell you exactly what music can do, how powerful it is, and how it can affect the brain and the body. Take a look. Now,
let me start with the observation that most of the sound around us is accidental and much of it is unpleasant. We stand on street corners shouting over noise like this and pretending that it doesn't exist. Well, this habit of suppressing sound has meant that our relationship with sound has become largely unconscious. There are 4 major ways sound is affecting you all the time, and I'd like to raise them in your consciousness today. First is physiological. Sorry about that, I've just given you a shot of cortisol, your fight-flight hormone. Sound's affecting your hormone secretions all the time, but also your breathing, your heart rate, which I just also did, and your brain waves. It's not just unpleasant sounds like that do it. This is surf. It has a frequency of roughly 12 cycles per minute. Most people find that very soothing, and interestingly, 12 cycles per minute is roughly the frequency of the breathing of a sleeping human. So there's a deep resonance with being at rest. We also associate it with being stress-free and on holiday. The second way in which sound affects you is psychological. Music is the most powerful form of sound that we know that affects our emotional state. This is guaranteed to make most of you feel pretty sad if I leave it on. Music is not the only kind of sound, however, which affects your emotions. Natural sound can do that too. Birdsong, for example, is a sound which most people find reassuring. There's a reason for that. Over hundreds of thousands of years, we've learned that when the birds are singing, things are safe. It's when they stop you need to be worried. The third way in which sound affects you is cognitively. You can't understand two people talking at once, or in this case, one person talking twice. Try listening to the other one. You have to choose which me you're going to listen to. We have a very small amount of bandwidth for processing auditory input, which is why noise like this is extremely damaging for productivity. If you have to work in an open plan office like this, your productivity is greatly reduced, and whatever number you're thinking of, it probably isn't as bad as this. You are 1/3 as productive in open plan offices as in quiet rooms. And I have a tip for you. If you have to work in spaces like that, carry headphones with you with a soothing sound like birdsong, put them on, and your productivity goes back up to triple what it would be. The fourth way in which sound affects us is behaviorally. With all that other stuff going on, it would be amazing if our behavior didn't change. So ask yourself, is this person ever going to drive at a steady 28 miles per hour? I don't think so. At the simplest, you move away from unpleasant sound and towards pleasant sound. So if I were to play this, for more than a few seconds, you'd feel uncomfortable. For more than a few minutes, you'd be leaving the room in droves. For people who can't get away from noise like that, it's extremely damaging for their health. And that's not the only thing that bad sound damages. Most retail sound is inappropriate and accidental and even hostile, and it has a dramatic effect on sales. For those of you who are retailers, you may want to look away before I show this slide. They're losing up to 30% of their business with people leaving shops faster or just turning around on the door. We all have done it, and leaving the area because the sound in there is so dreadful. I want to spend just a moment talking about the model that we've developed, which allows us to start at the top and look at the drivers of sound, analyze the soundscape, and then predict the 4 outcomes I've just talked about, or start at the bottom and say what outcomes do we want, and then design a soundscape to have a desired effect. At last, we've got some science we can apply, and we're in the business of designing soundscapes. Just a word on music. Music is the most powerful sound there is, often inappropriately deployed. It's powerful for 2 reasons. You recognize it fast, and you associate it very powerfully. I'll give you 2 examples. Most of you recognize that immediately. The younger, maybe not. And most of you associate that with something. Now, those are 1-second samples of music. Music is very powerful, and unfortunately, it's veneering commercial spaces, often inappropriately. I hope that's going to change over the next few years. Let me just talk about brands for a moment, because some of you run brands. Every brand is out there making sound right now. There are 8 expressions of a brand in sound. They're all important, and every brand needs to have guidelines at the center. I'm glad to say that is starting to happen now. You all recognize that one. This is the most played tune in the world today. 1.8 billion times a day, that tune is played, and it costs Nokia absolutely nothing. Just leave you with 4 golden rules for those of you who run businesses for commercial sound. First, make it congruent, pointing in the same direction as your visual communication. That increases impact by over 1,100%. If your sound is pointing in the opposite direction, incongruent, you reduce impact by 86%. That's an order of magnitude up or down. This is important. Secondly, make it appropriate to the situation. Thirdly, make it valuable. Give people something with the sound. Don't just bombard them with stuff. And finally, test it and test it again. Sound is complex. There are many countervailing influences. It can be a bit like a bowl of spaghetti. Sometimes you have to just eat it and see what happens. So I hope this talk has raised sound in your consciousness. If you're listening consciously, you can take control of the sound around you. It's good for your health. It's good for your productivity. If we all do that, we move to a state that I like to think will be sound living in the world. I'm going to leave you with a little bit more birdsong. I recommend at least 5 minutes a day, but there is no maximum dose. Thank you for lending me your ears today.
Music has a lot of power, more power than people imagine. There are scientific studies that show that if someone has had surgery and you play certain types of music, the wounds, the surgical wounds will heal faster with certain types of music than with others. And that is something that goes back to synchronous and dysynchronous rhythms. Our bodies live on rhythm. Hip-hop is powerful because it alters the natural rhythms of our body. That's why if you've ever been in a real nightclub where the music is real loud and the system is set up right, when you come out, your heart palpitates. And anybody who really has lived a club life knows what I'm talking about. Your heart palpitates because the beat of and that's why bass is used, because it overrides. That heavy bass, boom, boom. Whatever beat it sets to, your body tries to reset to it because you feel literally the vibration coming through the floors. And so our bodies are on a rhythm. And if you know, we should have between 60 to 90 as a normal, 50 even if you're a real athletic person, 50 to 90 beats per minute of your heart rate. These songs change that. And of course, the body is made so that you beat regularly. Sinus rhythm is a regular rhythm. The sinus note of your heart sends this rhythm out, and it should beat very regularly. But this synchronous music, what it does is it crosses up that rhythm. And so what begins to happen is you're no longer hitting every second or every 3/4 of a second a regular rhythm, because the beats are off. They're set off. Your body rhythm goes off. When that happens, your mind, everything about you, how you're oxygenated, everything that happens to you is off. And anybody knows that one of the ways to get someone high is to cause anoxia or hypoxemia, which is to lower their oxygen level. That's why we have these stories in the hospital, these young girls who suffocate themselves or strangle themselves, young boys even, trying to get this weird high. It's very popular now among young people. And people think it's suicide, but what it is a craze where people are looking for another level of high. It's satanic. And it's a cult, but they'll strangle themselves from their closets. We've had reports of that even here. And they'll strangle themselves because if you can get close to being, low in your oxygen levels real low, you get a buzz, you get a high. And that is part of what happens when the music is dysynchronous enough, when the beats are off enough. If you mess with the way the heart beats, you mess with the way the body is oxygenated. And so literally your brain begins to function differently and your defenses go down, more importantly. What begins to happen then is that, first of all, regular life becomes boring. If there's something that changes the way you function and adds pleasure to it, you're going to seek that pleasure. And so it changes things. So it's hard to sit through a class. How do you sit and focus on a teacher who's simply speaking in regular English with no beat, no rhythm, no nothing, or worse? If you have a lobectomy, as it's been called, and they take out this part, you lose your personality, but you lose your ability to reason. This is where the music becomes incredibly dangerous, because out of this frontal lobe is where your reasoning center is. And what happens is there's a chemical released in your brain called dopamine that makes you feel high. And once anything does that, and music is a very good way to release dopamine and stimulate emotional response. Once you do that, you seek after whatever you release dopamine for. And so music becomes a literal drug. Now, that's what cocaine does. Cocaine is a powerful dopamine agonist. It makes your brain release tons of dopamine. I keep telling you guys about how one hit of a crack cocaine, and maybe I shouldn't say this on camera because I don't want anybody to go try it, but it's about 100 to 1,000 times as powerful a release of dopamine as an orgasm is. And like we were saying last night, that's why a crack addict can go without sex. And food. Food is another way. You eat good food, dopamine is released. It's pleasurable. That's why you look forward to it. Your mouth salivates at the smell of it. Right. You begin to prepare to have it even before it's there. So what has happened to our young people is that this frontal lobe is your defense system. Music bypasses the frontal lobe. It enters. Your ears are way back here. Your frontal lobe is way up here. This is your temporal lobe. Music bypasses your frontal lobe, gets into your brain, so that when music is given to you, whatever message is tied to the music is not properly analyzed.
Now, one of the things that the doctor was talking about in that video, he was saying how your heart tries to adjust to the beat, to the rhythm of the music, and your body actually follows the rhythm of the music. So when you decide to consciously let yourself go with the music, your body follows. So you start to dance. You have to make a conscious effort to not bob your head, when the song comes on. You have to make a conscious effort not to, dance, not to get up and hit the floor. Because as soon as you allow yourself to succumb to the power of the music, guess what's going to happen? You're going to start to move. You're going to start to dance to the rhythm. And that's your body adjusting to the rhythm, because they are allowing themselves to succumb to the rhythm. Now, kids, they usually don't have a choice. Sometimes they can do it. But you see younger kids, they get in front of the TV, they hear that music, they start shaking to the rhythm. Nobody taught your kid how to dance. Your kid is just learning how to walk. Sometimes kids don't even walk yet. They can crawl. But when they hear that music, they'll climb up on something, or they'll rock back and forth. We've all seen this. This is the power of music. Now, one of the things I want you to understand is that the ancient Egyptians and most of the Africans speak a tonal language. They speak in tones. Now, Vietnamese has 11 different vowel sounds and it has 6 different tones. Now, Cantonese has a complex 6-tone system. And Thai is even a very complex tonal system, tonal language. But English has no tones at all. Now, as a matter of fact, the Rothman Research Institute in Toronto, they was actually studying, tonal language. And they realized that people who speak tonal language actually can really decipher music better than other people. They have a real rhythm. Their brain is already set to the rhythm of music. So it's real easy for them to play instruments or sing and, things of that nature. So the neuroscientists at the Rothman Institute, they basically said that if you speak a tonal language, it improves how your brain hears music. It improves how your brain hears tones. And they came to the conclusion that music is a language. Now, before you speak, a stimulation occurs in the brain and then the words, flow out. Now, people who speak in tones, when they speak, the tone of that language comes back to the brain through the ears and it actually stimulates the brain. So the implications are people who speak a tonal language over time actually improve a higher brain development. So basically more parts of the brain become developed and they become smarter. Now let's just think about a dog who doesn't speak English. Just think about tones here. Think about visualization. So a dog, what happens? You tell a dog to speak. After he speaks, you give him a treat. Now, the dog is going to take the representation of that treat. Whenever they see it, whatever tone comes out of your mouth, their brain is going to hear that tone and obey that command in order to get that treat. So if the tone is to speak, he's going to bark. He hears that tone. That's what he understands. He understands the tone. Dog don't understand English. It's the tone he understands. So he's going to do whatever that tone tells him in order to get that treat. Now, I want you to think of the implications of what I just said and apply it to hip hop music. Apply it to music. Apply it to hip hop music videos. See, we have to understand positive and negative tones. One tone is going to be positive. It's going to help your brain function. It's going to make you smarter. Another kind of tone is going to destroy your brain. It's going to make you lose control. It won't stimulate the brain at all. It's going to take control of the brain and force you to act out and do what that tone is telling you to do. So, black people, we always wonder why white people send their kids to music schools and why they make them play an instrument like the violin or the piano when they're growing up. What's that whole thing about? Why do rich white people get all dressed up, all fancy, just to go hear somebody play Mozart or Beethoven? See, we didn't understand, we didn't get what was the whole fuss with Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. What was the whole fuss with classical music? It was just a bunch of guys playing piano or playing violin. What was the whole thing with that? But what they was doing, these geniuses actually played certain music, certain songs at certain tones that would stimulate a higher brain function, that would actually help your brain develop and make you smarter. This is what these guys did. So you have Mozart, who has the sonata for 2 pianos. Played at D major, this song actually stimulates the brain. This song actually, it's been documented as helping stop seizures in patients who have epilepsy. It's amazing. You can Google it yourself. So these people knew how powerful this music was and that it actually stimulated the brain. Beethoven Symphonies 5 and 6 improves brain activity when played at certain frequencies. And that's another thing about all this music. They figured out if you play this at different frequencies, because I said before, everything operates on frequencies, then it has different ways of affecting the brain. So basically, like at 18 hertz, improves memory, language, and processing power of the brain. So you can actually do math a lot better while listening to this music at 18 hertz.